I heard an Anglican bishop in the Bahamas on the radio. This was a few years ago, and on the broadcast, he actually called the Anglican Church a beacon of civilization in the Western Hemisphere and in the Bahamas. And this really brought to mind the African in captivity and the experiences that shaped the consciousness of those said people, the Africans in captivity. Because in reality, the formal education that most of us have received in the Bahamas and in other Caribbean countries in America was actually produced by the colonial powers of the day, who were the English, who actually instituted the academic curriculum, the spiritual practices, and basically everything else became a taboo. When it came down to African consciousness, the churches actually were the principal forces of opposition to maintaining African spiritual practices, the use of African language in everyday speech, and this was the erosion of our African value system, African cultural systems, because when we set foot in the Bahamas, we were under a regime that was completely under the control of the British. And so this really spoke to the larger paradigm. It was a lens to a larger landscape, as I heard Michael Eric Dyson put it, a lens to a larger landscape. Because as we enter another era, another era of change, another era of awakening, we find that the major obstacle that we have to surmount, that we have to conquer, is this notion of connectedness to the British Empire via culture, via language, via the structure of our general society. You know, there's a connection, this unreasonable connection that many who are in the positions of leadership have chosen to foster and to give credence to. I found that even many Africans on the continent, they seem to have a notion that um, we are unable to come to grips with our African identity as long as we speak the language of our oppressor, as long as we use the slave masters' titles, our surnames, we'll be unable to fully embrace our African spirituality and awareness. And this is a position many people in the conscious community share. And many people feel like for you to make this transition, you need to actually shed your surname, shed your colonial surname, and embrace an African surname or a completely African name in order to begin your journey. It's a position I kind of agree with because, to a certain extent, the surnames that we bear, they tie us to a legacy of degradation and slavery, which, as the years progress, as it becomes more entrenched, as it becomes an African representation in the Bahamas or in the Caribbean, then we'll find that um, it becomes so deeply entrenched that our descendants will be unable to even separate from it. As long as we have generations who can use these surnames to trace their family title back to a certain point, they become now so necessary for our everyday existence that it's almost like a catch-22. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. Because if you get rid of the surname, then there's a legal challenge that you would face down the line, and if your intellectual property that was held in that particular name, you will have to lose that intellectual property. Um, then you have the whole issue of your family being unable to trace themselves um, to their genetic lineage or genetic family tree in the country. You might find that you won't know your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, um, by virtue of the fact that your descendants will be bearing a different family name than the one that they were accustomed to. But I mean, I think that's a challenge I think we should be willing to face, considering the fact that um, we've been held in this type of bondage for so long. You know, any type of shift that would liberate us would have to be a revolutionary shift. So I think we should start to learn more African languages online. You can go on YouTube and search for videos with actual instructors who will teach you everyday common phrases or some vocabulary that would be useful in order for you to learn an African language. But I think the first step would be to actually re-engage. We need to re-engage our African heritage in such a way that um, we can find some harmony. We can erase this perception of a division between Africans in the West and Africans on the continent. And also, it would be edifying. You know, you will find it will be satisfying and edifying for you to learn a language that is relevant to you. And it will become apparent to you as soon as you start to speak the words that there is some connection, that this is something that has been missing, that you needed to reawaken. You know, so we need to learn African languages. Um, some may not be willing to um, get rid of their family title. Right now, at this point, I don't think it would be prudent for me to do that immediately. But I think at some point, I will have to address this issue. You know, I've never been comfortable with Master Curry's last name. After all the things that Master Curry did to my family, I find it to be very disrespectful that now on my passport I'm a Curry. You know, or it's so outrageous that everyone on the plantation who was considered property immediately assumed the name of the people who said that they owned them. So I found that to be a little bit of a challenge that I need to address at some point. But I just wanted to speak about this because the comment from the Anglican Archbishop is something that is shared by many who live in the post colonial era. You know, they say, God save the Queen. They say, um, England did us a favor by putting us in slavery because now I guess we speak the Queen's English. Or we have roundabouts, okay? Our police wear these outrageous costumes, you know. The magistrates wear a wig that imitates the hair of um, the former colonial society, you know. So I guess these are the things people would be willing to trade for their own identity. Um, a particular pastor even said, "Thank God for slavery, because now we have tourism." Right? So generations of our people will be in the same servitude that they were in on the plantation, except now they will do it for minimum wage. Except now that they will do it for minimum wage plus a $2 tip, right? They will do it for minimum wage, a $2 tip, and have somebody spit in their face, right? A racist can spit in the faces of some of our hotel employees and restaurant employees, but you know, the guys are saying thank God for slavery because now we are in a permanent state of servitude. Now the servitude is a major pillar of our economy. So I guess some people are saying thank God for slavery because they are the one-eyed man in the land of the blind. They secretly can benefit and they can avoid the trappings of abject poverty. So, in their mind, this is paradise too, you know. But the thing is that we have come to realize what is paradise for one might be hell for another. So, we need to actually reawaken our African identity in order to escape this culture of um, depreciation. We are being depreciated. We have found ourselves unable to relate to one another. We can't relate to one another in everyday situations. We explode with anger for simple things as long as it's a black person. But we find a mannerly and cordial attitude whenever we are faced with a person who is not our race. So how did we come to this point where it's so difficult for us to relate to one another? We will kill each other faster than any other person else, anybody, any other person on the planet. You know, we bear a lot of secret grievances with one another. We just want to assassinate the character of any other African who appears to have something that we don't, or who doesn't support a view that we have. You know, who doesn't socialize with us the way that we want them to. We will destroy them. But we will bear the oppression from other races with a smile. So is this the civilization that the Anglican bishop was talking about? They consider the period of our most intense oppression to be a gift to our people. You know, we don't really have a precedent to follow. We don't have a model which we can implement. We find ourselves in this post-colonial era. We woke up in a daze from a long sleep to find out that we are not even in the land that our family originates from. We're speaking the language of a colonizer. We have the surname of the slave master, which is like a brand. So I came from the curry slaves. All right, I don't know if the curries went for 20.99 or 19.99. Um, they had some Fergusons. Maybe they sold the Fergusons for 10.99. The rolls, there's a lot of rolls, so maybe the roll might have just been $1.99. Okay, but the reality is we were like stock. We were the first stock on the stock market. Okay, so it's the civilization that we are so proud of. These nationalities that just create more and more division, where we start to think that those who carry a certain flag, they also carry another form of genes, that we are not Africans. Okay, could you imagine if the descendants of the slaves were actually Orientals? Okay, so you have some Chinese looking people in Jamaica, Chinese looking people in the Bahamas, Chinese looking people in Aruba, Barbados, um, you name it. And these people not recognizing that they came from Asia. Could you imagine? Millions of people in a region who directly descended from Africa don't actually acknowledge their African identity, or they are being prevented from doing so with a warped education model. But just let me know what you think. I just wanted to make a random comment about this notion of um, Eurocentric education and whether or not it's been redeeming to our people over the years. But just let me know what you think about it. Drop me a comment, like, subscribe. One love.